All right, welcome back. In this video, we're going to focus on verifying email addresses. Now, there's many different reasons why you'd want to do this. For instance, resetting passwords. If you don't verify a user's email address right away and they lose their password, well, then you wouldn't have a very good method of resetting that password. Let's say you see some suspicious activity on a user's account. You could send them a message via an email, and it could help prevent some form of fraud. And one thing to remember is we're going to be sending emails, and with that comes a reputation. So we don't want to be sending a lot of emails to email addresses that don't exist. So if we want our emails to continue to be delivered, we're going to have to make sure that those email addresses exist. And finally, let's remember that these email addresses hold value. Let's say we're rolling out some new features and we want to inform our users. Well, this would be a perfect avenue for that. Now, just remember that we don't want to abuse this. If we're sending out a bunch of emails that users don't want and they're labeling them as spam, well, future emails are going to end up where they deserve to be, in the spam folder. So let's just keep that in mind as well. All right. So we're going to go ahead and create a new account. And to make sure that the user has access to the email address that they say they have, we're going to go ahead and send a random code through an email to that email address. The user is going to later come back and take that code and re-enter it into the form and verify they do have access to that email address. Let's go ahead and make a new one. Okay, so let's go ahead and check our email. Refresh this. Oh, there we go. And we're going to go ahead and take this code and we're going to go ahead and enter it into our form. Hit submit. Email verified. Go ahead and log in. So at this point, we could go ahead and log in. So let's take a look at the code and see how this all works. And we've created a struct called message. This is just so we can pass in useful information such as username, email, or an error message that we created ourselves to the users via our templates. And looking at main, we're going to have our different routes here. We're going to have a register, and then we're going to have a register auth for authenticate to make sure that the information meets our criteria. And then this verify email is taking us back to that other form that asks us to enter that code to verify that we have access to that email address. And eventually the login page is just going to go ahead and render our login form. So let's go ahead and take a look at, so at the very beginning, we were at /register, which was the one where we put in our username, our email address, our passwords, our password, and so on. So anyway, /register is on the register handler, and that's just going to go ahead and execute the register.html file. So we're here in our verify email folder, and it just has our main.go and has our 3 templates, as you can see here in the templates folder: login, register, and verify. So register, at the very beginning, you could see there was our criteria we were asking for the user, and we had our form. And when the user would click submit on that form, the action it would take would be a post method request at register/auth. So again, /register was rendering this form. Once we hit submit, sends us down to, or sends us to this path right here. And this is just going to, in review, we've gone over this in another video, so go ahead and go back and check those videos if you want to get in the nuts and bolts of how we're checking the criteria for the username, the password, checking to see if it exists and all that. Anyway, check username criteria. I went ahead and just created a function for this, so it's just going to go ahead and return an error if there was an error. So I just shot down our code here a little ways, and this is, and basically it's just the stuff we did in the previous video. We're just checking all the different criteria that we had listed for that, and from length, whether it has letters, all the different things in there. And what we're returning is an error. Say, for instance, username must contain only letters and numbers. So if we're just creating a new error here, and if it doesn't have something like that, then we're going to go ahead and let them know the error. So username must be longer than 4 characters, less than 51, for instance. If it was outside those bounds, that would be returned. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and return nil. So we want to be able to return nil. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump back up in my code here, back to where we executed that function. There we go. So if everything is fine with our username, it's going to go ahead and return our error. And if our error is nil, then everything's great. But if it's not equal to nil, we're going to go ahead and send them back to the register page and pass that message, whether the length is off or whatever we found wrong with that. So again, a lot of that's review, so we're just going to go ahead and breeze right through that as well. Same thing for our checking our password criteria. It's going to go ahead and return an error if there's a problem, and then we're going to go ahead and just pass that error into our template down here and let the user know, like, hey, what was wrong with how they're trying to register. And let's just go ahead and keep going down. And then we're going to check to see if the domain is valid. And then we're also going to go ahead and check to see if we can see if there is an address out there, if there is a server for that. Anyway, like I said, that's all review, so go ahead and check that out. We're going to go ahead and create a transaction, because we're going to go ahead and we want all of the different things that we're changing on the database. We want to make sure that all of them execute successfully, or else we want them all to roll back. So we're going to go ahead and create our transaction. We're going to go ahead and begin it. If there's an issue, we're just going to go ahead and send them back to the register page, let them know there was an issue. And we're going to use defer for our tx.rollback. So we're going to roll this back in case something goes wrong. So it's going to go ahead and roll everything back unless we get to the end of our code and we explicitly say, transaction.commit. If we don't run transaction.commit, it's going to go ahead and run rollback. So if it sees tx.commit, this is not going to be executed. So it'll be looking for that. And so our first statement is we're going to select the ID from users where username is equal to something, and we're going to go ahead and check to see if they've already exist. So we want to make sure that someone isn't trying to use the username that someone else already has. And then we want to make sure that we're getting SQL errors, no rows. We want to make sure we're getting this error. We should, because if we're searching for this new username, if we're getting anything else, then we have a problem. We want to make sure, this one doesn't exist already, and we're not stealing somebody else's, not doubling up usernames with somebody else. And like in the previous videos, we're going to go ahead and create our hash for our password. And then we're going to go ahead and insert into user. So let's go ahead and take a look at our tables. Okay, so we have a users table. and they're going to have an ID, username, email, a hash. When they're created at, we're not going to be dealing with that, but it's always useful, kind of nice to know how long a user has been on your platform. So we're going to use that one anyway. And we're going to use this is active as well. So once someone's verified their email address, we're going to go ahead and change this to true. So we're using MySQL, which doesn't have a Boolean, a true false. So we're just going to use tiny int, and 0 is going to be false and 1 is going to be true. So all these, we want to make sure they're not null. We want to make sure username is unique. And of course, we're auto incrementing the ID field. Now, the other table for email verification is email underscore ver. It's going to have an ID. Now, this ID is not the same as the other one. It's auto incrementing, so it's just so we can use it for our own diagnostic purposes. But again, we're going to have your username, email, and that verification code. So we're going to send that verification code to their email, and they're going to go ahead and enter it into that second form. And once they submit it, we're going to go ahead and take that verification code that they got from their email address, and we're going to check it versus this verification code. And if they are the same, then we know that they do have access to that email address. So we take a look at this. We've created 2 people already, and this is active. When we first put into the first form, this was a 0, and then we went ahead and entered that verification code and hit submit in the second form, and it did match, and it turned this from a 0 to a 1. Now, this is active is pretty helpful too. Say you had some suspicious activity and you wanted to keep any major changes from happening to an account till something can be verified that, yeah, they haven't been hacked, or there isn't some form of fraud going on. You could always change that back to a 0, so it can be handy in that respect as well. Anyway, let's go back to our code. But yeah, if you want to create these, you can just pause the video and let's go back. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create our user. If the error is not equal to nil, then we want to make sure that we go ahead and let them know. And oh, I'm sorry, this is just the prepare statement. So this is just saying, hey, if there was an error while preparing the statement, we're sending the person back to the register page and just let them know there was an error and just to try again. And again, we're going to just go ahead and defer.close because we're not going to be using this a second time. We're going to go ahead and create the time, and this is going to be for our created at, so we know when this user created their account down the road. And then we're going to go ahead and finally execute our statement. We're passing in username, email, hash, current time. And like I said, that is active is going to be set to 0 until we can verify that email address. And we're also going to go ahead and see how many rows are affected. Yes, you don't need these print lined here. If there was an error, we'd be logging it, but this is more for just for teaching purposes, so that way it's easier to follow along. Anyway, we want to make sure that when we execute this, that our error is nil. If it's anything but nil, then we want to go ahead and run this chunk of code here to say, hey, there was a problem, and send them back to the register page. Or so we have our or statement here. We want to make sure that the number of rows affected is only 1. If it is not 1, we know we have a problem. So again, we'd want to go ahead and run this chunk of code here and return to go ahead and exit out to the outer function. But if everything is good, we did affect just 1, and the error was equal to nil, that doesn't run, we just continue down our code. We're going to go ahead and create our random number. And again, we're going to use another insert statement. Remember, we're still using the our transaction struct. So that way we can roll all this back. If something goes wrong, we're going to prepare another statement. So this one's inserting an email verification table, username, email, verification code. And we have 3 different things we're inserting. And if we have any error preparing the statement. Of course, we're going to go ahead and send them back to register.html again, let them know why. And of course, we're going to defer close. And we're going to go ahead and execute this statement to insert, like I said, the username, email, and the very important verification code. And again, we're going to check with our OR statement. We want to make sure both these satisfied. We want to make sure, again, error is not equal to nil. And again, the rows affected, we want to make sure that rows affected is equal to 1 and the error is nil, or else we're going to go ahead and run this chunk of code. And here we have a function we've created called email verification code. Okay, so when I put that in there, we were up in our function up there, and this shot us down to our function we created down here. And again, this is all review. And remember, we're just using these system variables to go ahead and grab our from email address, as well as the email address we're using for our SMTP server. Anyway, like I said, this is from another video. If you really want to dive into it, go ahead and look into it. If we do come across an error from trying to send that email, well, we're going to go ahead and return that. And then this would not equal to nil. We'd go ahead and try again. Send them back to register.html. Remember, we're just passing in the random number and our email. Now, if we get this far, we haven't run into any issues. So everything that we've done with the database, we want to go ahead and commit. If in the rare chance we had an error with that commit, we want to go ahead and check to make sure we didn't have an error, and then handle it accordingly. Remember that, like I said earlier, that we have a defer tx.rollback, and if we don't roll that, if we don't have explicitly have it running tx.commit, it's going to be looking for that. If it doesn't see that, it's just going to go ahead and roll everything back with that defer statement. Now, if there is an error, one chunk of code that we've seen a few times, like just printing off, letting them know what the error is, we're sending them back to the same page. Here, we're running an if statement, and we're just running the tx.rollback. Now, more often than not, we're not going to have too many issues with that, but just in case, tx.rollback does return an error. And if there is an error, we're going to go ahead and check this error and make sure that if it is not nil, we're going to go ahead and just let ourselves know by printing it to the terminal. And like I said, in actuality, you would be just logging these, but this is just so we can see while we're learning. So anyway, so we're running rollback, and yes, it does return an error. In the rare case that we do get an error, we want to go ahead and let ourselves know about that. Anyway, we're creating our message, and if everything went fine, then we're going to go ahead and execute our verify email.html template, and we're passing in our message to this, our M, which is of type message. Like I said, that has those three different structs on it. Oh, there they are: username, email, and error message. And so if we take a look at verify email, this is that second form that we were looking at. As you noticed on our form, it went ahead and filled in the email address field for us. So if there was that field, we would go ahead and place the value, place our email address right here inside these parentheses for value. So that's why it populated that input with that email address. And of course, the user, there's no value for email verification code, that input, because the user is going to have to retrieve that verification number from their email address, place it in here, hit submit, and once they hit submit, then it's going to go ahead and run the verify email piece of code. And as you can see, See up here, the verify email code is going to run the verify email handler. Copy that. And that'll take us down to that handler. We're going to parse our form. We're going to grab both our variables. Remember the email and verification code. We're going to go ahead and create our transaction. If there's an issue with creating that transaction, we're going to go ahead and handle that error. And we're going to roll back if we don't use a tx.commit. Anyway, so we have our verification code from our form. And our first statement we're going to be dealing with is we're going to select the verification code from email verification, where email is equal to that one that we're passing in, which that's just going to be the email that we got from our form. And we're going to run query. We're going to go ahead and find that. We'll return our row. We're going to scan that row, and we're going to go ahead and take our verification code from the database, and we're going to go ahead and save it to the memory address where this variable resides. And then if we have an error scanning, then we're going to go ahead and handle that error. We're going to send them back to verify email.html. Maybe they put in the wrong verification. No, this one's just in case it doesn't scan properly. Sorry. And we're just going to let them know there was an issue. And then we're going to go ahead and roll everything back. Actually, since that was just a select, it really wouldn't be anything to roll back. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and take our verification code, which we got from our form, and our verification code that we got from our database, and we want to make sure that these two are equal to each other. And if they are, then great. Then we're going to go ahead and make some changes. So we're going to go ahead and update the users, and we're going to set is active to 1. If you remember, we went ahead and set that to 0 from the start until the email address is verified, since the verification code they gave us in the form is the same as the one we sent to the email, the one that we have in our database. Then we're going to go ahead. So now we're going to go ahead and set this to a 1. So we'll create our statement. We'll prepare it. If there's an issue, we'll handle that. And then we'll defer, close this statement when we're done. We're going to go ahead and look at how many different rows affected. And so here we're executing our statement, and we're passing in our email address. And if the error is not equal to nil, or if the rows affected is not 1, then we're going to go ahead and run tx.rollback, after sending the user back to the verify email, verify email.html page. And everything runs fine. Then we're going to go ahead and send the user. We're going to go ahead and execute our login.html template and pass in the message email verified. Go ahead and log in. And then we're just going to go ahead and commit the changes. And say if we didn't run this chunk of code here, if the verification codes didn't equal, we're going to come back down here and just let them know there was an issue. The error message, there was an issue verifying email. Please try again. And we're going to go ahead and set the email equal to the email that we got from our form. And we're going to just pass in this message struct into this verify email.html template. So again, this last bit of code here is running if those two codes did not equal. So if we take a look at verify email.html, we do have an error message. It'll be run down here. And of course, our email is just going to be passed in here for the value of that email input on our form. And finally, on the end of that form, I'm sorry. So if everything went fine, they entered the correct information, and they send us, and they execute this login.html form, then we know everything ran okay. So Again, I didn't want to spend too much time rehashing a lot of the same stuff that we've gone over. Go ahead and go back and check some of those videos. In the future, we'll go ahead and keep adding some more to this. If you have any questions, go ahead and post them below. Real big thanks to all the thumbs up. They really do help. They are greatly appreciated. So if you like the content, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.